podcast where best friends and next-door neighbors, Willow and Lillian, spill the tea on murder, mysteries, and other things that go bump in the night. So get your favorite teacup ready, and let's get into it. Welcome to Cruelty Podcast, Patreon edition, with me and Willow. This is Lillian, in case you forgot what I sounded like.
And this is Willow.
Your cat came back.
My cat came back, you guys.
Her cat ran away, but now it's back.
She's been gone for like a week or two, and it has been the most nerve-wracking time of my whole life. And I've had animals go missing and be stupid and run off and all kinds of crazy things. Like my other cat got hit by a car, no offense to her, but
That was a crazy cat.
it sucked. I definitely cried, but like she made my life a living hell. Soleil, my cat that just came back, is a replica, like looks identical to the cat I just lost early last spring. Even has like the little white patch, like has
Soleil is
markings,
so loving, though.
but she's loving. She's so sweet, and she hasn't gotten off me all day. She just wants to be held, and
I'm glad she's back.
I'm so happy. I'm the happiest. Okay, sorry.
So you've hinted at this case all day, and I didn't want to
Girl.
say, "Hey Willow, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about," but I don't.
No.
So you have to tell me now.
My ADHD has been at like full speed, max capacity. Let's go. And I've been all over the place. And I've been like, this case has been in the back of my mind for like past week and a half or so, like pretty much since Soleil left. I was actually planning on doing this as the first episode of this month because I thought that she was a femme fatale killer, and I was like, okay, I'll just do her because she's a person of color and like an old-timey case, and I was like, this is what I want to do. So I was just basing all of this off of the headlines, which were basically like voodoo priestess axe murderer, voodoo priestess murderer, and I was like, dope. Yeah,
all right.
That's what I want.
Yes.
But boy, howdy, I am so far down this rabbit hole, it's ridiculous. Like, I am that dude from Always Sunny with the fucking
Strings of the map,
everywhere.
yeah.
Like, it's nutcase over there. And, so I just want to talk about it. It's way less facts and it's more conversation. I really just want to, like, see what you think, because there's a general, like pretty much a folklore about this case, about this woman. It seems like nothing can be really trusted as far as being factual.
Well, if it's a person of color and it was from, 1912?
1912.
Then look, what we're dealing with here is a lot of racism and a lot of bullshit, and journalism didn't really have checks and balances in it back then.
This is Louisiana, and from 1856 until about 1950, people of color, both Black and Native American and Mexican, any non-white, even Chinese or even Asian, and Indian, nobody that was not white could speak against a white person in court. It was just not allowed.
Oh, that's fucked.
Yes. So
I want everybody to kind of be aware of that when we go forward talking about this.
That's the general background of what's going on.
There's no way we're going to be able to get the absolute truth facts out of this case.
Right.
We're going to have to conjecture.
There is so much sensationalism built up around this case. I looked at the actual court transcripts of this case. I looked at original newspapers, especially the headlines. They're very disgusting.
Salacious,
Very salacious, very over the top, building up this really grandiose story, and I'll get into it in a second, but it was, man, the more I looked into it, I was like, I don't believe this shit. I don't believe this shit for 1 second. Not one. And then I started digging more, and I think I might have figured it out. So come along with me, and then we'll try to see what we think together, I guess, because a we'll bounce the ideas off of each other. But basically, this all started around the trial of Raymond Barnabet, Clementine Barnabet's father. Now, he was sentenced. He was convicted and later sentenced to death for a number of murders that had happened in 1911. Now, this is in Lafayette Parish, Louisiana.
All right.
And so the murders that he is on trial for, being convicted for, was the Byers family, murdered on February 11th. The Duress family on February 25th, 1911. The Cassaway family, March 22nd, 1911. That was actually in Beaumont, Texas, but, not too far away.
Oh, you know what? I've heard about this case.
Okay.
And I'm going to just, let me get this thought out, otherwise it's going to fly away because I'm stupid as fuck.
No, it's okay.
I believe that they connected it all to this guy, but have later determined, especially the case in Beaumont, Texas, was not actually related.
Okay.
That's what I heard on, some podcast a couple years ago.
Okay. When we get to the end, I'm going to go over a different person's timeline, and we're going to see if these dates
match
fit that timeline.
Ah, sweet. We're going to play detective.
I'm telling you, I am so far into this. I'm completely cuckoo bananas.
Cuckoo bananas.
Yeah. So he's on trial. Now the main sheriff on this case is Sheriff Louis Lacoste, and he was sheriff between 1904 and 1914. I actually had to look up his family tree, and I really couldn't find much further than his immediate family, because he looks identical to my ex-father-in-law, who his family's from the same place, so I was like, ooh.
And I told you, that guy looks like he's going to tie ladies to railroad tracks.
He does not look friendly.
No, he looks like he's got a stovepipe hat and a twisty mustache.
Well, and when I was looking him up, it was really hard to find, exact information about him, other than the fact that he was a sheriff. But I did see some links linking him to the K. I'm not laughing at it. I'm laughing because I'm uncomfortable. But linking him to the KKK. So I am wondering just what degree of racism this Louisiana sheriff was sitting in.
All.
Because, now here, he originally arrested, Mr. Barnabet, at the very beginning, it was okay, so they found these bodies, they found these families, just completely massacred, and by the way, it goes so far in depth about the depravity of these murders and the way that the families were found, the children that were murdered, what the scenes look like it was in so much detail, just about those particular scenes. When they first arrived on scene, they went into so much detail about what they found that it was just so hard to do the research. It got me very, very sick. And
we don't need to go into all
we don't
that.
need to do that, but we just need to realize that this is every single family that I talk about in this case was murdered almost exactly the same way.
With an axe.
With an axe, the entire families were slaughtered, and a lot of times the children were posed, or the family members were posed in certain degrees. Some were posed praying, some were covered. Most of the time there was a bucket of blood collecting underneath the bodies, underneath the bed. The axe was always left on the scene.
And wasn't it their own axe too?
It was always their own axe. And I'll get into more of this later, but people always think it's really weird that there were so many axe murders around this time. But everybody owned an axe because everybody had wood for heat. Since the dawn of human time, up until very recently. So, the axe is a very common murder weapon. We just don't see it often today because our heat comes with a flick of a switch.
Yeah, and in addition, firearms aren't as hard to load now. And much more readily available in the United States.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Why messily butcher everyone with an axe when you can just shoot them?
Right. But it does take a lot of rage.
Oh, I would say so.
It definitely does take a lot of rage. Now, and we also have to think about, like, we have a lot of classism, racism, misogyny going on. What do little boys usually have to do? Like, there's always really big families around this time. Nobody had birth
to go
control.
Gather the firewood.
All of the little boys in the family had to go gather and chop wood. That was, like, the first thing you were taught after you could walk, basically.
Yep.
So we have to realize that there's a lot of, like, pent-up shit there, and a lot of angry men went crazy with an axe. A lot of times, because that was the first weapon they were using. That's the first thing that they were learning to use.
Yeah.
Much, like, even before a knife or butchering or anything like that. But it was a very common trait. Everybody knew how to do it. So it's like anybody could have done this. But anyways, so I have no idea, like, what really connected him to this crime other than Sheriff Lacoste didn't fucking like him. He called him in, like, he arrested him, like, pretty much immediately. He didn't have enough evidence to, like, get him fully in, so they released him. And then, like, turned right back around. I think it was, like, a day or two later. Magically, quote unquote, found evidence and took him back in.
That sounds like horse shit.
See, and that's the thing, because, like, later on, they also, quote unquote, found more evidence, and that's fucking fishy, too. So, they call Raymond Barnabet to the stand. You know, they've beaten this man mercilessly. They've gotten him, like, interrogated him for, like, a day or two, and gotten him to basically admit to these crimes, and, you know, with the pretense that, like, if you admit to this, then we'll save your family, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So they bring his family up to the stand, like, one by one. They bring his wife up. They bring his son up. They bring his daughter up. Now, his wife's name is Nina Porter, which I just think that sounds like a singer, and I want to buy her album. Their son's name is it auto-corrected it to Zeppelin. It's not. It's Zephyrin, which I know. I was like, oh, I like that name a lot, Zephyrin. And then their daughter, Clementine. Clementine was around 17 years old at this time, why she was allowed to stand trial, I don't really know.
Racism and misogyny.
Because it was against her father, a fellow black person. So, of course, and I think her brother was younger than her. I don't think it was an older brother. But anyways, there wasn't very much information on all of that other than the fact that each one of them had a completely different story. Because it was completely fabricated, completely made up. Every single one of them didn't know where to place the lie to both save their ass and potentially save their father in any degree. You know, like, he may be in there for life, but at least he's not going to get hung. Like, I think they sentenced him to death. I'm not really sure on that one, but each one of the family members told a different story. And it raised suspicion both in the media and in the court case. So from there, they started poking around. They started investigating the family further. Because of all of this, and again, it's being sensationalized in the media. This is like one of those original, like, trial by media, but 1912 style. They ended up arresting Clementine and Zeppelin. He actually had an alibi, so they let him go pretty much immediately. But since she didn't have an alibi for, like, a couple of the murders, she was taken into questioning. Now, this girl is 17 years old. So you can only imagine what type of interrogation she went through. She later ended up confessing to, like, 1 murder, then 17 murders, then 35 murders.
Yeah, funny how that happens.
At the age of 17.
Yeah, I doubt it.
Exactly. They all had to admit that their father was abusive and alcoholic, and that they wanted their father in jail, and that their father made them do it, all this stuff. Then it got, like, hyped up and sensationalized because of, like, one headline. It was like one headline led to another headline about how one of the bodies was left with their hands displayed wide open with pieces of wood in between each finger to prop the fingers apart. And there was, like, a message written on, like, I don't know if it was written on blood or on the wall, but it was basically a message that said, we are the Human Five, or the Human Five Gang, quote unquote. Now, if this was actually left at a murder scene, or if it was just, you know, something that was told in a story, I don't really know. It kind of seems like folklore by now, but everybody calls it truth, and they ended up going with the story that this was a cult by the name of the Church of Sacrifice. Now, if you look up the Church of Sacrifice, or the Church of Sacrifice cult, the only thing it says about this is the court case with Clementine. That's it.
So it probably
It says voodoo priestess, the quote-unquote executioner of the cult of sacrifice, like big, huge headlines. And it says that,
this is all
you know,
horseshit.
she killed 35 families, or 35 people, you know, all families, and, you know, it was very big and very over the top. Now, one of the pieces of evidence they had to convict Clementine was that she had an entire outfit soaked in blood. Like, it was hanging up, and it was soaked in blood. And then it had bits of brain matter on it.
Like you do.
If you murder someone...
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of these murder scenes had men's clothing left there. With blood on it. Left there.
So the killer's leaving their bloody clothes at the scene.
Right. Now, originally, when she was interrogated before her sentencing, she had originally said that she later confessed, which obviously she's being made to.
She's coerced, for
she's
sure.
coerced into saying that she, quote-unquote, stole some men's clothing, made herself look like a man, so that way she could sneak into these people's houses at night, butcher them, and then leave her man's clothes behind so that way she wouldn't be suspected.
Okay.
Now, the reason why this story is continuously growing is because, okay, first they convict and, ultimately sentence to life Richard Barnabet. Well, then the killings keep happening. There's another murder, and there's another murder. So they're like, okay, well, then it's Clementine. They get her. She's the head of the cult. The cult leader died. They passed on the crown to her. Then more murders happen. And they're like, well, she must be telling her cult
to keep killing. Yeah.
So she spends about 10 years in her life sentence, because they can't sentence her to death because she's not an adult. And so they sentence her to life. But 10 years in between the first 10 years, I'm going to backtrack. At, like, the first year or two, I think she was 2 years in, she tried to escape. And she got reprimanded, and, as soon as they caught her and brought her back, she apparently turned into a model prisoner. And basically, I'm sure she was beaten into submission.
Right.
And then she ended up being a perfect citizen, or a perfect prisoner, and obeying all of the rules, that she got a promotion to get a surgery.
Uh-oh.
She had a quote-unquote medical procedure and then was released.
She had a lobotomy.
She had a lobotomy.
God damn it.
I know, I'm like holding back tears because I watched so many documentaries on lobotomies in general just to understand what happened.
Oh,
because I've done that before, because I've always been curious, but I wanted to like really put myself in Clementine's shoes in this one, and absolutely horrendous, the things that this woman has gone through. And she was released, and her brother were never heard from again. There was a story that later surfaced, again, like just like any folklore, that, you know, in the 80s, an elderly woman told her grandchild that, back in my day, I killed 35 people. I was the voodoo murderess. You know, that kind of thing.
Okay, Grandma.
Don't really know if that happened. It may have happened, like she may have told her daughter or granddaughter that she was
accused.
That person accused. Yeah. I don't know for sure. I really do wonder what happened to her. But that's the thing. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and what else is sucky about this is, so 2 innocent people get their lives ruined. Mm-hmm. In addition, the murders never get solved, as far as I know.
Right. Okay, so the MO of the murders that happened all play out the exact same way with varying, you know, degrees. Everybody's human. Everybody does things a little bit different. But they all had such similarities that they couldn't have been a different person. They were always at night. They were always within 1 mile to 2 miles within a train tracks or a train depot. Now, I started to realize,
was it always families too?
It's always full families.
Okay.
And most of the families, if not all of the families, have a little girl in the family between the ages of 8 and 12. Ew. Or 6 and 12. And usually the girl is taken, like, special attention to. She's either propped up in some sort of way. And all of these MOs started reminding me of all these different killings I had heard about. And I was like, and this is all the same time period, because I'm really bad with names and dates unless they're written down and right in front of me.
Same.
So while I'm thinking about this, I'm like, am I getting these cases mixed up? Like, I'm messaging you, and I was like, wait a second, was this, that, and the other? And I kind of kept digging, and I was like, why is it that in my brain I keep going back to between 1850 and 1920? That's like this window where I'm just noticing all these axe murders.
Yeah, for real.
So, we have a suspect, and he's a man by the name of Paul Mueller or Paul Miller. He's seen different ways getting, you know, on different paperwork so he can get away with shit. But he is actually he's actually responsible, that we know of, like a whole list of murders, and I'll get in it. But it's basically like, it looked like a like whenever a band's playing for the season and you see the lineups and you're like, okay, is he coming to like a state near me? Like, you know, like it was like a lineup. Like it was just like such a long list of all these different places. You could see how he was traveling the trains.
Yeah, that's obvious. Like he's obviously just one of those scamps that travel on the trains.
Yeah, because it's the same MO.
And a lot of people don't realize this, but from about the 1800s, maybe even sooner, up until the 1940s, people would pass through town, especially rural communities, and they would be drifters looking for work, and in exchange, they wanted room and board for the night.
Very common.
And this was so common, and it would be weird to turn someone like that away.
Very, very, very
because
common.
These rural places, these farms, it's a lot of hard work, and it was often just the family working. So they looked at it as like free labor for the day.
Well, and the railroad companies would often line the railroads strategically through farms.
Yes, for that reason.
Because those people were poor. They would obviously gladly take the money for them to line the railroad through their fucking property.
Yeah.
You know, if you had more money, they'd be like, no, fuck you, go
And you
around.
know, when I'd heard these stories, I was like, oh, bullshit, they didn't take in, drifters like that.
Oh, no, they fucking did.
So my grandmother, her family, they were cotton farmers in southwest Oklahoma during the Great Depression. Wow. They were taking in somebody every week, at least. Yeah. And I was like, what if it was a crazy axe murderer? Yeah. And they were like, well, we would have been axe murdered.
For real.
And she said they took in some real wild-looking folks. Yeah.
It happens. I mean, it still happens today. Like, I mean, you see it more with truck drivers, like, no offense, but, like, in the trucking communities, because there's a lot of traveling. Yeah. That and...
we got the ice truck killers and stuff like that in the 70s.
A friend of mine fell on some rough times. He was hitching around town. He actually hitched a ride from a guy across the highway that goes from California, like, across like Nevada through Oklahoma to Arkansas. I forget the name of it, but he was on that highway. He got picked up by this guy in like a pickup truck, and like halfway there he was like, huh, I murdered the dude for this truck.
I'd shit my pants.
I know. And somehow this kid got off free. Like, I'm sure he was just like he looked like some dirty kid that, you know, didn't know anything, didn't matter.
Fucking festy kid or something.
Yeah. But I'm pretty sure that's what saved his life. Because he's great now. But yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that because like shit like this still happens today. Mm-hmm. But back then this was very, very common.
Yeah.
Very common. And more so back then, but even still today, police task forces only deal with their jurisdiction. That's why we see this happen in true crime cases all the fucking time. People get away with shit because jurisdictions don't share information. They don't work on cases together. They work against each other.
And we want to talk about it, that being a long time ago. Well, look at 9/11. If the letter agencies had communicated with each other properly, 9/11 wouldn't have happened. The CIA had information that the FBI didn't have. God. Oh,
don't you hate that shit?
Look, and I'm not like I'm not like a truther or anything, but it is like a proven fact that our spy agencies weren't communicating with the NSA, they weren't communicating with the FBI, weren't communicating with the DEA, and if all those agencies had been communicating together like they fucking should have been, then it wouldn't have happened, or at least it could have been stopped.
Right.
But that's for another day.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, I was talking about it with Travis, my husband, earlier. I was like, you ever notice that like people who are really into true crime are also like ACAB all the way? Because like the police just fuck up all the cases. Like so many people would still have their lives if the police were actually doing their job and like working on these cases properly and not fucking with evidence.
And here, you know, I'll put my 2 cents in on that as somebody who really desperately wanted to get into forensic science. Mm-hmm. The reason I didn't, because I wanted to become a detective.
Right.
And the reason I did not was because I'd have to be a cop first.
Right.
And if you found an institution on fucking racism, because a lot of people don't know this, but the police were founded to catch runaway slaves.
Right.
So if you found an institution on the enslavement of people and institutionalized racism, you can't reform it because it has no foundation of goodness to begin with. It must be abolished and we have to start over.
Absolutely.
The end. Mm-hmm. And so if people want to come at me for saying fuck the police and defund the police and get rid of the police, because I'm past defund, I want get rid of. Mm-hmm. Well, people can come at me all day. And, you know, I've had people say, what are you going to do when you need to call the police? I'm not going to. It's called a machete. Don't come in my house.
Oh, goodness.
We got stand your ground laws here in Arkansas. You don't... Hey, you just have to be in my yard, and I don't even have to warn you.
Yeah.
It's true.
I know. Okay, but back to this case, because we have to go down this fucking rabbit hole. Because I don't believe that it was Clementine. I don't believe that there was even a cult.
Oh, absolutely.
There was absolutely no evidence that there was a cult other than hearsay, other than articles about Clementine killing 35 people.
It sounds like something somebody made up.
It really does, and it turned into folklore.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't want to make this like a public episode, just because I didn't want people who were like, well, I'm from Louisiana and that's my history and all this stuff, because it's in everything. It's in all of their papers, you know. It is deemed truth. I just don't believe it. Now, this Mueller guy, he was convicted of murders spanning from 1900s. No. Oh, yeah, 1900 to, sorry, I was thinking 1800. I was like, he wasn't alive then. From 1900 until, hold on, I'm scrolling, till 1912, he was later on convicted, like, right after that. But there's even suspicion that he was murdering people in 1850 as well. Like, he may have got his start in 1850s, and there's lots of reasons to believe. A lot of people have actually written about, there's books about, how he may have been the person to kill Lizzie Borden's parents.
Ooh.
Yes.
Because I've studied that case actually quite a bit.
I knew you would like that little nugget, because that was what, 1853.
Yes,
I want to say
around there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those to where I can see that she would have done it,
Mm-hmm.
but I can also see how she didn't,
And how she could have been framed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because any woman, first of all, any woman alive is, a piece of shit in the government's eyes. But especially any woman with any type of mental illness. Because, there are indications that there wasn't a mental illness there. And, she would be deemed crazy and insane, quote unquote, even just for having depression. Or, symptoms of ADHD. Or just any type of mania at all.
She was gay, also.
And that could be deemed a mental illness back then.
And when I say rumored, I mean really lightly rumored. There's no evidence of it.
She was a partier.
Same girl.
Just saying. But, okay, so all of the murders that the Barnabet family was convicted of were in 1911, between, February and March 1911. Now, this guy was, he went from, Virginia, West Virginia, Texas, down to Iowa, over to Kansas. Then he was in San Antonio, Texas, in March of 1911. There was also a similar murder in San Antonio, Texas, in March of 1911, that the Barnabet family was suspected of. Because there were similar ties.
Yeah.
In the MO.
Do you think it's possible, because I always thought with these string of axe murders in this time period, that he had an accomplice or a copycat?
I thought about this long and hard. But no, I really don't think so, because here's the thing. It's always at night.
All right.
It's always an entire family, and it's usually while they're sleeping.
It'd just be so. I just wonder how hard it would be to axe murder somebody quietly enough to not have the whole family bum rush you.
Right. But how hard is it to keep one person quiet, tiptoeing through a house, when there's more than one person tiptoeing through a house?
And if they're asleep and you've cracked them in the head with an axe, they ain't gonna make no noise.
They're not saying anything. And 9 times out of 10, the victims had a cloth over their head to muffle the sounds.
All right.
Yeah, and I'm assuming it was usually maybe the children first.
I would think so.
And you could kind of, from my point of view, thinking that, with the lens of, I think Clementine's completely innocent.
Yes.
She was quoted in, court documents saying that she killed the children so that way the children wouldn't have to grow up without parents. And that just sounds like a coerced statement. This little girl, she's barely 17 years old, is being bullied by these big racist men.
I'm going to be fair and say that when women have killed children, and it's whole family thing, and women are the perpetrator, they will say that.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's just a woman's natural inclination to say things like that.
Exactly. And that just sounds like somebody was why'd you kill those kids?
She's like,
and it's because I wouldn't want them to go through this, because we're talking hours and hours and hours and hours.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't believe she did it for a minute.
No.
I think she was under duress. I think she'd already seen what they did to her dad.
Mm-hmm.
Man, and the whole cult aspect, because I've heard about this case before. I didn't remember when you first told me.
The voodoo cult thing.
Yeah, and I looked into it, and I was like, why does everyone believe this? Why did the cult disappear then?
Right. Where are the other cult leaders? Where are the other cult members? Where is their symbol? Where is their meeting place?
Yeah.
Where is anything that
You take any cult, and I don't care what it is.
Yes.
Let's take Heaven's Gate, for example. They almost all died. There are still people in Heaven's Gate cult.
Yes.
You can find their symbols in literature to this day.
Absolutely. Every cult.
But not this one, magically.
This one has one court case, and that's all you have.
Never hear from them again.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And, man, this fucking sheriff, bullied this Baptist pastor and was like, because he knew that the Barnabet family visited this church because, God forbid, I don't know, they go to church. And so they cornered this pastor, this very sweet man, and was like, you're a ringleader for this cult. This cult is taking up residence with your church, and you guys are, preaching like devil worship, and you should kill people and sacrifice them.
Oh
and
my God.
all this shit. Because again, people are racist and they tie voodoo. Just
to
like
Satanism.
Satanism.
And
It's
it's
just
not
like
the
the
same
Satanic Panic.
I was fixing to
Louisiana
say.
had a voodoo panic where they thought all black people were casting voodoo spells on all white people, and they were in a state of hysteria, and they thought that by capturing as many of these people they thought were voodoo practitioners, that they would quote-unquote save their race. And I fucking hate this shit because it's not even fucking real. They tried to incorporate the voodoo by saying that Clementine was working her way up to priestesshood, and that her and some friends made these charms, and they wanted to see if the charms worked, and so they killed people, and when they got away with murder, they realized that their charms worked.
That's just not even how voodoo works.
It's fucking saying. I'm saying.
And, and most white people don't even know the difference between hoodoo and voodoo, and man, there's a gulf of difference. And it's just really annoying. I find the whole Satanic Panic, voodoo panic stuff just so obnoxious and stupid that I can't hardly hang, man. It just pisses me off.
And that's why I see, like, a lot of people wanting to keep their practices closed. Keep their relics closed. Keep their, like, their cultural boundaries. Not being a social justice warrior or like some like cultural appropriationist or anything like that.
If it weren't even that long ago that we're persecuting people for it, then we don't get to play with it, okay?
The fact that black people have not been able, like, we're just now able to vote in 1965, like, what the fuck? I mean, I just randomly remembered that today, and I just hate it. I hate that fact.
Yeah,
I hate the fact that black people couldn't stand up for themselves in the fucking court of law.
Not until 1956. It's fucked up. So, yeah, if a black person tells you,
That's 100 years.
Don't make a sour jar because that's hoodoo, then just don't.
Yeah.
You can make a witch's jar.
Yeah.
They made them over in Europe, y'all. Just don't call it a sour jar. They're asking you not to use a word.
Yeah.
Oh my God, just listen.
Yeah. Because honestly, look at how far their practice has come. Their practice came from their, like original peoples had to be whitewashed so that way they could still practice without being murdered. Give them some goddamn respect.
For real. Yeah, and it's funny, when I was looking into these axe murder cases a few years back, because they were just interesting, and I saw this case.
The Villisca axe murders and all of them too.
I was like, this just seems like the same dude going on the railroad, killing a bunch of people.
That's what I'm saying.
I do think it's possible, though you're probably right, unlikely there was an accomplice. I don't discount copycat.
There has been some claims of copycat, and I didn't want to misstep on that one, because that's definitely
for sure.
A thing.
Or just somebody with a similar MO.
Right, absolutely. It's a very common MO, especially because we have a lot of the cultures of the times. You'll see a lot of these specific axe murders. We see shrouds covering both the deceased faces and mirrors are a very common trait, which go back to Catholicism.
Yeah, I was fixing to say, that can be a cultural practice, too. I know back in, especially Victorian times, they covered mirrors.
Right.
So that the soul didn't get trapped in the house.
And this is at the end of Victorian times.
Yes.
Coming into Edwardian
period. Yeah, Victorian times, I want to say, ended in with Queen Victoria's death in 1895. So, but I mean, that... It's still, just because a period ended, it doesn't mean its beliefs and influences.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's saturated in the culture at this point.
And we have to keep in mind why they were so death-obsessed to begin with.
Absolutely. Look at the plagues.
the fucking Spanish flu, and it just killed the shit out of everybody.
And all these other diseases that we now,
well, they become like, they had weird little rituals and superstitions. Absolutely. So if you see them, can you say it's the mark of one killer, or is it just a cultural, like, time period influence?
And those types of things, with time become less focused, like we're not really able to see things more clearly, from this distance.
No, we're too far pulled back now. And so now we're only left with a horrible mystery.
And a basic, like, folklore about, some lady that, may or may not be true.
I mean, folklore around cases happens. It happens in the JonBenet Ramsey case. I see a lot of stuff talked about that is just absolute bullshit. But it was said in a book once.
Right.
As the researcher got it wrong. And so now it's like a Bible for the case. And this is it becomes its own modern folklore.
Right. There was a book that I wanted to mention. It's called The Man from the Train. So in the show notes, I wanted this episode to be more of a conversation about what had happened and like what our ideas and what we think, what our conspiracies are. But in the show notes, I have lots of links to. I have a link to the book called The Man from the Train. It is written by a father and daughter duo. A really, really great book. Basically talking about all of these, like, they compiled. It was weird because I was thinking about this for the past 2 weeks. I was like, well, this is like this murder and this case and this case and this case. They're all the same.
Yeah.
This father and daughter duo kind of made it their mission together to collect all of these cases that my mind was thinking about and compositing them together and making a timeline with the fucking, like, railroads and everything, like, seeing
cool
how
shit.
he could go and do all these murders. It's so fucking brilliant. And it was like, I was like just happening to think about it, and then bam, there it was. Like, there you go. Somebody else was also thinking about this. And so I don't know, it kind of feels like maybe we might be onto something, since more people are thinking about the same thing.
Exactly, because I'll tell you, when I started thinking it was all the same dude was when I was listening to, what's the murders that start with a V that my brain can't name?
Villisca.
The Villisca murders?
Mm-hmm. It's exactly like the Villisca murders. To a fucking T.
I know. So I was listening to that case, and YouTube's algorithm was like, hey, since you listened to this, here's 20,000 other more axe murder cases around the same time period.
Yep.
And I listened, and I'm like, wow, these are like all the fucking same. I was like, I think it's the same dude just riding the railroad killing folks.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't think you're just onto something. I just legitimately think that's what happened.
I really do think it's this Paul guy.
Yeah.
And we don't know much about him. Like, there's suspicions that he might be a German immigrant, but other than that, like, the suspicions, we don't fucking know anything.
So did he get
guy.
convicted?
I think he did. It was really hard looking into him because it was all like
hush hush kind of. It wasn't
all
a
like, it was all like
sensationalized.
hearsay. It was like, well, I think he's responsible for the Villisca axe murders, but like nobody wants to say it out loud.
Weird.
Everybody's like, I think, but he has like a list. Like, I mean, I just read off like, I mean, in my mind, I didn't want to read it out loud, but like. There's a whole list of murders, like, one date after the other, like, month by month, from 1900 to 1912. Like, we're talking, like...
He was busy.
We're talking some, like, 20 to 30 families. Not just individuals.
So
and
this
those
could
are
be
the
one
ones...
of the most prolific serial killers in the U.S.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. And he's so silent in the night, you know what I mean? Like, this is, like, the original Night Stalker, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like... He got away with so much.
It weren't hard to get away with murder back then.
It really wasn't.
No.
It really wasn't hard. He figured it out, and he did it. And, like, fuck that guy.
Fuck that guy.
Fuck that guy. But, like, my mind wonders about, like, how many other, like, specifically and especially people of color that got convicted of the crimes that this man committed.
Oh, my God.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I think, like, one of the cases I was listening to is a Hispanic man who'd been a railroad worker was actually convicted and, like, hanged. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure it happened constantly.
Right. Because they have to close their cases.
And see, now this is why I'm against the death penalty to this day.
And a person of color can't speak out. I looked up, like, the entire court case that was all centered around, like, some guy in 1856 murdered some people, and some Chinese, a Chinese man saw what happened, basically saw him drown these people, and was like, nope, I saw him do it. And they were like, no, see, you're not white, you are not on the level of the white man. And so it was written in law that,
oh my god,
that, and I'm not going to use the language because the language was absolutely terrible, even in like actual law documents.
Don't doubt it.
But they said that, I mean, very specifically, Asians, African Americans, Native Americans, and Hispanics are not to speak against the white man, for they are not on the same level.
I just want to
From 1856
understand.
to 1956.
Fucking
For a
gross.
whole fucking 100 years, that was a law. 1956. Our parents were alive then.
Well, was
What
this
the
just
fuck?
in Louisiana? Or
No,
was
this is like, no, this
nationwide?
wasn't Louisiana. This was, I think this original case was in California. But it became a national law. Because before that, it was just, like, duh, of course a person of color can't speak against a white person. They
suck.
Yeah. Like, we're just like, we
Yeah.
hate them. I say we, I'm like,
We're just role playing here.
I'm not very white.
No. I just mind-boggling
Just,
to me. I don't
it
understand.
really baffles me that it was not that long ago. Like, this seems like hundreds of years ago that we had racism written into our laws, like literally written into our
It
laws.
still is with like the way they move around like voting districts and shit like that, and then asking for several forms of IDs so that you can vote. Shit's still racist as fuck. We're just sneakier about it. And I'm about done. Like, I'm sick of this shit.
Right.
And but because we're poor, so we can be sick of shit all day long.
This is one of those cases where it was, it was saying that it was targeting low-income families. But that's just because those are the people that lived next to the railroads.
Right.
And then, like, there was a lot of stories saying that it was targeting, especially them, they were targeting black people. And they were really pushing the black on black crime, which I heavy quotes on that because I fucking hate that shit.
Stupid.
Pisses me off. But they were really hitting home with that. I also listened to another podcast, which I actually really like this podcast. There's a podcast on people of color who kill, and they're called Fruit Loops because Fruit Loops is a cereal that's colorful.
Oh, that's cute.
Serial killers. Anyway, so they did an episode on them, but they did it more through the lens that they were targeting, that they were a cult, and that they were targeting couples, like interracial couples, because it was, frowned on back then. That was a lens that a lot of people saw this case through, that it was actually documented, and a lot of different writings about this was that they were targeting mostly black and interracial families.
See, and I think
I just think it was the place.
Exactly.
I think that was low income families near railroads, and that just happened to be what the demographic was at that period of time in that fucking parish.
I just think it was a crime of opportunity.
I do too. And I think it's all by happen chance, whatever.
I wouldn't be surprised if the killer was racist as fuck. It wouldn't shock me.
I wouldn't either, but there's a lot of other white families that this man
Exactly.
killed, and
I was fixing to say, I know from looking into this a long time ago that it was almost just as many white families.
I think it has more to do with the little girls and the families than anything, and that fucking pisses me off.
Oh yeah, I agree. That's what
It's really rough.
I think that was the
the
main
things that
motivation.
were done to the children, and like that's why I didn't do this case for a long time, because
It's gross.
I thought that Clementine was doing all of this, and I was getting so far into what was actually done to each individual victim that I overlooked a lot of like the bigger picture here. And once I took a step back and was like, wait, hold on a second, let's get out of the gory details
and look at the overall, yeah.
because the gory details are enough to like just make my stomach turn. And I watch pimple popping videos for fun. Like, I'm not squeamish at all, but like this case got me to a whole new level
It's nasty.
It's absolutely nasty. It's absolutely grotesque.
Yeah.
And I just don't believe that Clementine would leave brain matter just sitting on her dress that's hung up in her closet. I don't fucking believe it.
I don't believe it either. It's stupid.
That's my 2 cents, and that's how I feel about it.
You can feel about it that way.
That's how I feel. God bless fucking Clementine. Like, I really don't think she did it, and I feel sorry for her. And fucking, oh my God, I feel sorry for any of the 20,000 people that got lobotomies during this time. 20,000 people in the United States.
One of the Kennedys got Rosemary Kennedy.
Yes! Oh my God, I would love to do a case on her.
I would too.
Oh,
Maybe my next Patreon,
yes,
I'll do that.
Do that.
Or another unsolved missing persons case, because you guys know that's my jam.
I know you do. You love it.
I can't help myself.
I know.
The mystery tickles, the brain meats. Tickles. And it usually doesn't involve, like, a bunch of chopped up dead children. Usually. Sometimes.
I really can't deal with the children stuff.
No.
Like, it's so hard for me just to do the notes, not even the research, just the notes of a lot of these cases. I have to go back and forth between my room and my son's room and give him hugs. Yeah. Because it's rough.
I can't. Mine are older, but, like, I remember when they was little babies, and I just can't imagine. Y'all, I can't hurt a spider. I don't think I could. I can't understand hurting a baby, like a little kid. They're, and I'm going to be honest with you. I don't like children. They're annoying, and they stink, and they just suck, kind of. I mean, I love mine. Right. But in general, children annoy me, and I just can't imagine hurting one. I can't. For any reason.
Sweetest eyes.
They're just innocent. Babies. They're just like... Man, they didn't even ask to be here. Can you just leave them the fuck alone? Leave them alone. Oh my God. It sucks to be alive. Just leave children alone. Pisses me off.
And for God's sake, masturbate instead of fucking doing this shit. It's so stupid.
You know, no. I'm sorry. I'm beyond that. I'm like, just go ahead and jump off a bridge.
Yeah, you're right.
Take yourself out, you giant piece of shit.
Yeah. Go fuck yourself.
Because, like, I'm not sure. I must say something controversial. I'm not sure that pedophiles can help it, like in their brain. However, you can not do it. You cannot do it. But if that were me and my brain went there, I'm out, y'all. I'll be like, ooh, wiring got fucked up when I was Babby was being formed, and I didn't form right. I'm gonna have to check myself out.
Yeah.
And cowards, the lot of them.
Oh, speaking of which, do you want to hear how this stupid sheriff died? I did research on him because I wanted to make sure
eaten by dogs.
No.
That's a
shame. He accidentally killed himself.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Shoot himself or something?
I think so. It was in 1914 right after this case.
Oh, good.
And so I just... You know, and it doesn't say because they wanted to, like, I don't know...
Preserve his dignity.
Yeah, they really tried hard. I read the original newspaper from back then, and they just talked him up. They kissed his whole ass. Whole bit.
His whole lily white butt.
It was so bad.
Look, if you're connected to the KKK, you can blow off your whole mustache.
His entire family, like the last I could find of them was the census from 1940. His entire family by 1940 was living, like his 3 kids were living with their mother. They were in their 30s. The mother was in her 60s, living with the mother in California, all of them in one house. That just screams a family that got away from... Some shit.
It sure do.
They were running away.
Well, I hope they...
I don't know. That's just what I think. But I just hope that I hope that my ex isn't related to them. I did so much research to try to make sure.
That's very funny. No, but I definitely... I remember reading about Clementine and her dad, and I just immediately thought, oh, they didn't do it. That's stupid.
Right?
And I have heard it, like, touted as just the truth, the gospel.
It is. I know. That's why I didn't want to cover this.
It's a cult.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was researching for Cult Month, that popped up.
Okay, yeah.
And I did about that. I went like, I narrowed my eyes at it, and I said, you know what? I don't think that was real, so I'm not covering that shit. Because I even Googled it, and I'm like, oh, well, there's nothing else.
There's nothing else.
There's nothing else.
It's just what the fucking cops said and what they got them to admit on trial. Basically.
I don't believe hardly any confession.
Doesn't it sound a lot like What's the case that you just did?
Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole. Yes, it does.
Sounds just like that.
Only they were white boys. They didn't get beat up,
Well,
but they got milkshakes.
Fuck that. Oh, it makes me so
Here,
mad.
Henry, you want another milkshake and hamburger? And he's like, sure, I killed 20 people. So stupid. You fucking dumb Texas bastards.
Well, and like, and even in some of the newspapers, it even says that like Clementine, like never told the truth about these murders. That they were never the same story.
Oh
Apparently,
my God.
apparently somebody like one of the papers went on to write, nothing that Clementine said about the murders can be confirmed by any other party or has a ring of truth about it. A great deal of what she said is demonstrably false. That was in one of the papers.
Because she didn't do it.
Exactly.
They tried to hold that up to prove how guilty she was because she was a liar. It's because she didn't do it.
It's because she didn't do it. She's a
ding-dongs.
17-year-old girl who's scared to death to be murdered by cops because that's what people do.
Yeah.
They get murdered by cops.
Yeah. No, they just scrambled her brain with an ice pick.
They just scrambled her fucking brain and totally ruined her.
Yeah.
They killed her personality. They killed her and left her shell to roam the earth and probably be a good little housewife for somebody later on. Like, oh, it grosses me out to think about what they did to women with those lobotomies and then sent them out to be basically like little sex dolls.
I want y'all to know it was disproportionately women and people of color.
Absolutely.
That were lobotomized.
Absolutely.
You know, and maybe I'll cover that whole thing because the history of lobotomies is really wild.
I went down several.
And it feeds into like the whole eugenics bullshit too and everything and forcible sterilization.
Yes. And the guy who did it, I like watched a documentary.
I did too. It was fascinating.
And
he's such a piece of shit.
Yes, he was doing all of this work on chimpanzees first.
You leave them monkeys alone.
Heart. They're such good babies. I love them so much.
Well, I'm scared of them.
Good. We should be. We should
leave them alone.
Yes,
because they belong in the forest, in the jungle. I remember hearing the story of the lady who kept one as a pet and it tore her fucking face off.
No, what?
Yeah.
Really?
And she's the first woman with a full face transplant.
So, like, face off, like, literally happened?
That monkey tore her face off.
Sometimes I feel like Mateo's going to do that to me.
He's not. You don't have the upper body strength of a chimpanzee.
That's true. Thank God.
You don't have to worry about that shit.
Oh, he's close. God, that's terrifying.
Yeah, they freak me out.
You know what? I just remembered one of the very first true crime cases that actually got me into true crime, and I'm just now remembering.
What was it?
It was because I used to collect magazines because I was really into collages, if you haven't noticed. And so I used to have stacks of magazines, and I remember in one of the magazines it was talking about this. I don't know if she was from the Middle East, so I don't remember what country, but this Middle Eastern woman, this beautiful, I want to say it was Pakistani, this beautiful actress, model, like just gorgeous woman, was basically cornered by her husband, and because they have had the upper hand in the law, he got away with it, but he threw acid in her fucking face.
It's really common in India and Pakistan.
Yeah. It wasn't India, but I do think it was like Pakistan or something, or Afghanistan, but it was acid to the face, and I read the entire fucking thing about how he strung her up and left her to die and poured acid in her face, and she was gorgeous. And she lived through it.
Ooh, let's put acid on his dick.
I know.
Because I'm sure he was no prize.
Ew, no he wasn't. He was gross.
I hate everyone.
And they were forced into marriage.
Of course.
I can't wait till all of this is like so far behind us that we don't even remember what it's like.
We'll be dead.
I know.
And so will our children.
Yeah.
And maybe the earth.
Oh shit.
It
right.
ain't got long.
I know.
Yeah, it's all fucked. Sorry, I don't like to be this way.
I don't either. But hey, I'm glad that we got to talk about this because this has been heavy on my mind for some time. And I'm glad that I'm not the crazy one and that
No, I've always thought they didn't do it. So definitely, I'm glad we covered it too. As for what I'm going to cover next time, maybe lobotomies, because they're interesting to me. And it would be, I haven't done a cool history bit.
I would love to, because I just did so much
Can you
research
please,
on it.
though, remind me, because I'm going to say I'm going to do it, and I'm going to forget,
Oh,
and then I'm going to be sorry.
I got it, because I'm obsessed with this shit. When I worked at Starbucks, I have chronic migraines, and so it was across the street from the hospital, and I used to ask all the doctors for lobotomies because I had such a bad migraine.
Well, it wouldn't fix it.
It would... Where it feels like it would, because that's where the headaches.
I know it feels like that, but it wouldn't.
I really just want it.
I understand the desire to have a brain instead of a brain, have a potato in there, because I frequently feel that way.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to know anything.
I'm not envious of any of the poor people that had to go through this procedure.
No.
I'm just saying I have a headache right now. That's all.
Same. But anyway, thank you all for putting up with our nonsense as per usual.
Yeah.
And we love you.
Love you.
Good night. Find us on your social media platform of choice. Linktree/Cruelty has all of the links. Check out our Patreon for exclusive episodes, merch, ad-free episodes, live ghost hunts, and much more. Please be sure to subscribe. New episodes are uploaded weekly. Thank you so much. See you next time. Music and production by Willie B.